You're listening to episode 302 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn. Today, we're interviewing Matt Maruca of Raw Optics. I've interviewed Matt before several years ago. He was one of the first companies to release blue blocking glasses and high quality ones at that. So a lot of his information over the last several years has been regarding how cheap blue blockers are using deceptive marketing and aren't a real solution to the real problem of artificial light at night. So if you missed the first show that I recorded with Matt, just search on YouTube, Matt Maruca, Mitolife Radio, and listen to that episode, because this one I wanted to make a little different. He does talk about his light diet and what that entails, his airport protocol, which I found really interesting because Matt has traveled to dozens of countries, and I asked him how he does it, how his sleep is, and what are his practices to keep his circadian rhythm balanced. I asked him how to properly light a home at night, what are the best bulbs to use, and he is very skeptical of the healthy circadian light bulbs on the market. He said that the slow-mo test to see the flicker on your smartphone is not an accurate way to determine that, because it could still be flickering with a higher quality device recording it, which I found fascinating. I also asked him about having overhead lights versus lights at eye level or below. And that was the most fascinating part of this interview for me, as I'm designing an underground bunker where lighting will be essential. So I'm definitely going to go at ground level or midway up the wall. I'm really excited to set that up to where there's very minimal, if no, overhead lighting in there. I asked him his thoughts on Elon Musk and Starlink, and I'm actually pretty surprised at what he said. I asked him about vitamin D, narrowband, ultraviolet light therapy, and then a few listener questions, including thoughts on deuterium depleted water, tips on getting through the winter. Does he recommend sleeping grounded? Should you wear red lens glasses before bed in the summer, even when it's still light outside? And a lot more. It was a really fun show, so enjoy. Here is Matt Maruca. All right, Matt Maruca, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was just smoking a cigar on the deck, listening to your 4-hour interview with Alexander Wunsch, which I started, I think, a couple weeks back, and life just got crazy, and I really wanted to digest it. So it's one of those interviews. You did a great job. Alexander's really fascinating to listen to, but I'll probably listen to that a few times because there's a lot of great nuggets in there, and you were asking great questions that I'll probably ask your thoughts on, kind of similar questions that you were asking him.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be able to work with him because he's extremely intelligent, and I'm kind of mind blown perpetually by the way he's able to explain really complicated topics about light and frequency and matter and energy in a really simple ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I just respect your journey. I think it's been maybe 3 years since we've seen each other in person, but I've seen your evolution over the years, and it's similar to mine, where you take kind of a childlike mind to all this stuff and are always open to new information and don't really get stuck in anything, which is just really cool. So I guess if people didn't hear the first show that we did, just starting with how you got into this, I think I remember you had was it gut issues and allergy stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as a teenager or even younger, as a young kid, I was having gut issues, allergies as well, seasonal allergies, really bad pollen allergies. I was having headaches in school and class, migraines, etc. And I had approached Western medicine because that's what you do normally. And, they prescribed all the different over-the-counter medications and some prescription medications for all those different issues. Didn't really do much, obviously, and because they don't treat the root issues. And so thankfully, my mom was a little alternative thinking, or even quite a bit. So she took me to a naturopath who kind of opened my mind to, a different approach to diet and things. And that was, I think, a step in the right direction, but I was still having the issues. And then I got really into diet on my own around the age of 14. I was doing like a paleo diet, and then an autoimmune paleo diet, then keto paleo diet, then a GAPS diet, almost basically carnivore, and so on and so forth. And I actually ended up, in the beginning, I felt better eating clean, like more paleo style, but then I actually felt a lot worse. Especially I was getting on these really strict elimination diets and keto and all this stuff. I just felt kind of terrible. I was like 16 at that point, and that's 15 or 16. And then I came across Dr. Jack Kruse, who I know you're very familiar with, and the information that he was sharing, all the scientists he was referring to about light and mitochondria and electromagnetic radiation and all that stuff, and how it affects our cells, circadian rhythms, et cetera. And it just really blew my mind. I mean, it opened my mind to the concept that we're so much more than just like a biochemical sack where it's just like you are what you eat and it's that simple. Like there's all these other factors that influence health. And from there, I proceeded to start my company, Raw Optics, making blue light blocking glasses, which you have some, and many, you've shared them with many people, and I appreciate that. And this has been awesome because it's helped a lot of people, and I've been able to travel the world and do some really cool stuff while furthering the mission, working on, being able to work with Dr. Alexander Wunsch now on some amazing new lens technology we're working on, like really groundbreaking stuff as far as the blue light world goes. And then lighting products we're working on, and light therapy products. So everything we're working on now. And that's been for over 2.5 years. We have a lot of stuff coming in the pipeline, probably in 2025, a few different categories of products launching. But anyway, so that's been fueled by, the company I was able to start. But then sometime in the middle there, around like 2021, I was really starting to feel pretty depressed, like kind of lonely, traveling the world, like had this freedom that I thought having some money and freedom would make me happy, or that I would definitely reach happiness at that point. But at the end of the day, it kind of felt like I was spinning my wheels. Like, yeah, okay, I'm in some beautiful place, or, with some nice people, working on my company, which I enjoyed for the most part. But it was starting to get really stressful, and there's no guidebook or roadmap, as for like how to live life, the best way. Maybe there are some, for example, spiritual texts that can give direction, which I'm a huge fan of now. But anyway, so at the time I was lost. And I felt I hit like a rock bottom. And so I started researching, or just reading, like thinking first and foremost about what could I do to fix this. And that the solution that I needed wasn't just like a dietary or a circadian rhythm thing. In other words, I wasn't able to biohack myself to happiness. And I think a lot of people reach this point, like no amount of ice baths, sunbathing, dopamine, grounding, etc., red light therapy, and so on and so forth, was able to like make me feel the fulfillment that I long for. And that's when I thought, okay, this has to be a psychological or a mental or a spiritual solution that I'm looking for here. And that's when I came across the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I had heard of, and the way he was really, I would say, translating a lot of ancient wisdom into the modern world, using science as a kind of language, an intermediary. And it's not like just making stuff up and trying to justify it with science, but actually looking at the research of neuroscience, et cetera, and how we can change and how this can change your life. So I started applying these meditation practices that he teaches, and also researching and looking into other more ancient meditation practices. And honestly, I would say that was like the biggest turning point for me in my life. And what I'm really interested in now is much more like a spiritual approach to life. So that's kind of been my journey. That's how I got started, and kind of how I got to where I am, or what I'm doing now, let's say.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think in our last conversation, I was telling you about how much I love sensory deprivation floating, and I really miss it. That's why I'm so excited to move. It's just been sitting on my grass out here for months until I move, because it's just such a power suck, and it's not really an off-grid thing. But to me, that's kind of like accelerated meditation, but you also get the weightlessness and the magnesium hit. So it's like a great combo there. But yeah, that's really cool. One thing that I hear a lot is that the language of our cells is light, and I think that's when I was looking into Jack Cruse's work years ago. That was kind of the message. But I interviewed a guy that studied Nikola Tesla, Royal Rife, Anton Priori, that worked with like noble gases and scalar energy stuff. And he said that the language of our cells, of our DNA, is actually scalar. And I'm just wondering if it's all of it, right? It's electric, magnetic, it's scalar, it's light, it's all of them in combo. And I think I tend to see people kind of say it's one more than the other. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm not super familiar with scalar and the research of the guys you've shared, but what I am familiar with is both Dr. Robert O. Becker, for example, who studied bioelectromagnetism and showed that our cells and our nervous system and our regenerative pathways are driven by electricity. And then on the other hand, the researchers who studied biophotons, Fritz Albert Popp and Alexander Gurvich from Germany, who basically showed that our cells communicate with light and biophotons. So this has been on my mind. I think it's a great question. Like there's a sort of, you could say on the surface, what appears to maybe be a conflict, but I would say that when we look deeper, there must be a way that it unifies, where there is electromagnetic or electric, literally electricity, electric energy, electrical energy running through our cells. There is photonic energy, light, scalar energy as well. It makes sense that these can all work together. So I would avoid, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in this particular topic, but I would just generally avoid like this or that kind of thinking and say it seems like the evidence is showing that all of these forces are involved in our biology and how our cells work.
Mm-hmm. How's your sleep with traveling this much? I was thinking about that earlier, and you're just, how many countries have you traveled to? It's crazy.
Yeah, I've been to a lot. I don't even know actually how many different countries, but even just this year, I do think about this a lot. I would say what I've been doing, one could say is like maybe slightly abusive to my physical body. However, at the same time, I've taken the mindset that I'm kind of greater than the environment. So in other words, I can use my mind and meditation and mental power to sort of maintain the integrity of my being. But I would say that it takes a really strong master, like a spiritual master, to be able to fully apply that. Or I should say just somebody who's really, really experienced. And I don't know if I have that level of experience where the power of my mind can totally trump, certain physical realities. And therefore, I'm sure that the traveling, not just in the last year, but over the last several years, has definitely had some kind of burden on my cells, on my mind, on my sleep. But with that being said, I've been in Bali now for almost a month in one place, like well established, and I sleep pretty well. Like I'm pretty active, so I get out and surf quite a bit, usually like 3 hours a day. I'm often doing yoga like 4 days a week for an hour and a half. So I'm getting a lot of physical activity in, a good bit of light. And that typically leads me to sleep really well. I watch the sunset, I walk on the beach, and then I'm pretty tired at the end of the day between all the physical activity and then work. I find that if notwithstanding all the travel I've done, which definitely has an effect, after I've settled in somewhere for a while, I do find myself fall into a pretty good rhythm. But the biggest impact on my sleep day to day is like, did I spend too much time on my laptop? Did I kind of overheat, let's say, because it's very hot here. And so if I'm not in AC, like, did I overheat? Did I take time to rest? Because if I contrary to what you would think, if you're mentally overactive, for me, this negatively affects my sleep. Actually, this isn't contrary to what anyone would think, but it's one thing to physically work, like to do physical labor. That makes me more tired and makes me sleep better. But like mental work and demand on my computer, it's somehow oddly disconnected. It's like you're running your brain really hard, but you're not really moving your body at all. So I find like I have to do a lot of physical activity to balance all the mental work I'm doing on my laptop throughout the day, phone calls, thinking, etc. So yeah, when I get settled, I find my sleep to be pretty good. And even when I'm moving a lot, I do sleep pretty well in general. The other big factor is meal timing. So like a key part of what I call the light diet is eating with the sun. It's like eating our main meal around the middle of the day when the sun is the strongest. And this is what both Ayurvedic traditional medicine and Chinese traditional medicine emphasize, like eating your main meal as lunch around, between 11 and 1 or around noon. And so if I eat like a big meal midday and then very little food later in the day, maybe like in Bali, I'll have a smoothie bowl because it's fresh and cold. Or maybe I'll have like some light, I don't know, cooked vegetables with tahini or something like this. Whatever, something light. So maybe a soup, like a cream soup, vegetables. No, I'm not going to have like meat later in the day. But if I do that, I find that I am even more tired and I sleep better, of course, because my stomach is empty. But it's like if you just put in a big meal and then try to sleep, some people sleep well after eating a big meal, but maybe they feel like they sleep well. I can't imagine the sleep quality is that high. So that's a huge factor for me, even if I'm moving around a lot. I feel like those day-to-day choices have just as much, maybe even more of an impact on my sleep and how I feel compared to the big picture circadian shifting of moving. But I'm not disregarding that also has an effect. It definitely does.
Yeah. I tend to eat lately just breakfast and dinner, but I try to keep my dinner ideally at least 3 hours before bedtime. And I notice if I eat too light, then I don't sleep as well. So I'm wondering if there's other factors at play, kind of the bio-individuality type thing.
Yeah, certainly there are. I'm not even familiar with what all the factors would be, but the way that we burn fat, the way that we, fuel our blood sugar when we're fasting, I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, yeah, where I was getting with your traveling a lot, I mean, I would imagine that your sleep was pretty good, because I think when people think of jet lag and changing time zones, they often think of melatonin supplementation, which in my opinion could be useful for that and for a lot of other reasons, cancer treatment and prevention and stuff. And you also want to make it endogenously in your mitochondria, but I'm sure you have a routine of kind of switching yellow and red at different times while you're flying and traveling, right? And changing planes and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. So I would say the main things I think about when I travel, a big one is what I just touched on, is meal timing. So like I don't eat on planes, or I should say that I very rarely eat on planes. I try to avoid it because my feeling is that eating on planes doesn't really lead to good digestion, and it can lead to making it a lot harder to adjust to the new time zone. I just feel that we don't really burn the food very well. And this is something Dr. Jack Kruse actually shared, something that a good friend of mine who's an Ayurvedic doctor and my personal doctor also advises from a more traditional medicine perspective, like don't eat on flights. And so I would typically aim to not eat anything within an hour of takeoff, ideally like 2 hours before takeoff. So it's pretty well digested at that point. And not even like a big heavy meal, maybe something a bit lighter. If it's a big heavy meal, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours before takeoff. And then upon landing, if I land in the day, there's always time getting your suitcases or whatever, getting a taxi. Typically, I'll be letting myself just like settle for an hour or so. And then I'll maybe go have a meal if it's daytime. If it's late, if I've arrived somewhere and it's night, then I'll just fast until the next morning when I'll have breakfast or even maybe lunch the next day, depending on how hungry I am at that point. So that's typically what I'll do. And that plays a huge role in me being able to get into a new environment. Like I used to think, people have to have jet lag or it's inevitable. And, before knowing all this information, and now I know that you can pretty much travel and not have jet lag if you do the right thing. So there's that. With the glasses, that's something I'm actually experimenting with constantly because I'm not sure what the best protocol is. some people will try to use, I have a friend who's even tried to use my own glasses in the evening, like, or I should say, they try to shift their rhythm forward before they even travel. And to me, that's not something I would do. You could do that. So like, for example, wearing, if you know you're going to Europe from the US and there's like a 6-hour time change from the East Coast, then wearing the glasses like in the afternoon to start pulling your circadian rhythm back, going to sleep earlier, waking up earlier, because that's what would be happening once you fly. For me, it's a lot easier to just adjust once I'm there because the sun is the most powerful stimulus. So you could just use that right when you get there. But so what I'll typically do in airports, I'll wear the daylight lenses just to protect my eyes from all the fluorescent LED lights. And to a great extent, the daylight lenses also protect the hormonal system from the kind of overstimulation of this blue enriched light that's kind of everywhere nowadays, lacking the near infrared component, which balances out the disruptive effects of blue to a great extent from a physical standpoint. It can balance out the degradation caused by blue and short wavelength light. But anyway, so daylight lenses are great for the airports and even on the flights in some cases. Typically, like if I'm next to a window, I like to open it to get some like wake me up stimulus, let's call it, in the morning or when when I want to be awake. But the radiation in the sun, it's very intense. So if I'm next to a window, I'll either close it for an extended period or just wear daylight lenses if I still want to have sunlight. So those are the things I'll do. For example, this is a big one, actually. A lot of the time on planes, they don't know what they're doing, but they're trying to manipulate the circadian rhythm. So like on new planes, they have these windows that auto darken, and sometimes they lock them so that you can't like undarken them. They're like tinted. They're not just a slider thing, a slider window. So then I have to ask the flight attendant sometimes, like, can you please unblock the system so that I can open this up? Like, for example, right when I was coming to Bali, it was like, it's day, guys. Like, it's daytime out. We're going to be arriving. Like, I don't want to have night, like on the plane in the dark, arrive, and then it's already 4 or 5 p.m. and then it's time to go to sleep. Like, having already been in kind of a night mode. I want to have as much daylight as I can until the day's over, get in, and then be tired, not sleeping on the plane throughout that time. So it's stuff like that I'm thinking about. And then whenever I get in, especially if it's night, again, I won't eat, and then I'll put on the sunset lenses. And that works really well. The goal for me is always like wake up early, well before sunrise or just before sunrise at least, and get the sunrise wherever I am in a new place. Like that, to me, if I miss that, it can be hard to catch, like to fix that. If you get in and you dial it in from the first day, which I was able to do when I came here, and I came from Europe, so it was a bit of a haul, then I'm like, it was great. But if you miss it, you can get into this funk of like 2-3 days trying to go to sleep earlier, trying to wake up earlier. I try not to use an alarm, but for example, the first day when I arrive somewhere, last point is I'll set an alarm so that I can make sure I get the sunrise. Even if I'm tired, I will get the stimulus and then make myself be active a bit that day and then get to sleep at the right time. So that's kind of how I think about like all the travel and time zone changes and the glasses.
That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of skipped ahead just because I wanted to ask you some different questions from probably what you normally get, but we should probably back up and talk about like blocking blue light and the benefits of it. It's amazing when you're in our community or that just, let's say, the natural health community as a whole, you're in this bubble. And when I'm building out 130 acres and just talking to the people working there and even just people on the street, it's amazing how this information is still not out there. Like, it really blows my mind that, the lights that contractors are putting in are the worst Home Depot LEDs. And I have to tell them, like, no, these are going to increase your risk of cancer and all these issues over time. And it's, there's a ton of companies now that make color changing lights that don't flicker, low EMF, all of that stuff. But the blue blocking glasses, I feel like that's a great starting point. That's where I started, because it kind of doesn't matter to a certain degree what your light environment is. I mean, there's still the hitting your skin, which is a big deal. But if you at least start with protecting your eyes, that's a great place for people to start, right?
Yeah, 100%. You kind of nailed this as well. It still does matter, the light environment, because of your skin as well. And for me, it's just, I'd rather not have to wear the glasses. Like, I mean, I love my glasses, I love my products, but ideally it would be great to live in a world where the lighting quality was all bioharmonious or supportive for our organisms. So And you mentioned also like there are a ton of companies making like the color changing lights that are flicker free and so on. I would be curious if you could send me these companies, because like we've looked at so many companies and tested so many products, and they're not, we haven't found any really good products, which is why we're making our own lights. So yeah, if you have some that you've found that are pretty good, I would love to get them and test them. I know like Philips Hue, that they make a color changing light, but then it does have quite a bit of flicker. Anyway, I'll be happy to see what you found for sure, because I'll be glad to use it until I have my own products. But anyway, there's several issues with the modern lights. There's the blue enrichment. So for two main reasons that I'm aware of, one is there's energy efficiency. So you can get, with modern LED technology, the maximum visible light output with the least amount of electricity consumption by increasing the blue component of the spectrum, because they have very efficient blue LEDs now. And so because the energy efficiency regulations were kind of crazily changed to just be all about this idea of saving electricity when it comes to lighting, Dr. Alexander Wunsch essentially says it's effectively illegal to have high quality lighting in the modern world, given the regulations. So they have to, to get that A score, like in Europe, it's A through G. I don't know in the US exactly what the scale is, but like the highest energy efficiency to the lowest being like a G or an F or a G or whatever. So in order to get that highest energy efficiency score, the light has to put out a certain amount of lumens per watt of electricity. I don't know exactly what the number is in the US on a scale, but essentially below a certain threshold, the lights are not even allowed to be marketed for general or sold at all. That's why the incandescents have been banned. Nobody ever actually banned incandescent bulbs. It's just that they made the energy efficiency regulations such that an incandescent bulb could never meet those regulations. So they were effectively banned, but not explicitly banned. But so they don't even, the factories are auctioning off the equipment. I mean, the incandescent lamp manufacturing industry is dead effectively now. So for better or for worse, we're in the age of LEDs now. So it is what it is, right? We kind of have to accept this because incandescents are almost certainly not coming back. So the two issues I was referring to when it comes to blue light enrichment, one that I believe was we got through is the energy efficiency issue. So you get the highest energy efficiency score by putting out the most blue light per watt of electricity, right? And that's how the light bulbs can reach maximum energy efficiency and be marketed to customers as green or LEED certified or whatever for all these new building regulations they have, where you get the sort of highest social credit if you build this energy efficient building. So anyway, on the other hand, there's the hormonal stimulation issue. So people who buy lights, employers, but also consumers for their homes who aren't really educated about this, are interested in having lights that make them feel energized. But it's kind of like, coffee. It's not really the most, you could say, sustainable or well-founded source of energy. Like, it would be better to have really great mitochondrial health and produce a lot of energy that way, and then add coffee if you want an extra boost, right? But not to depend on it, right? So modern blue enriched LEDs offer a sort of short-term hormonal stimulation that can make people feel a little more awake and more energized, but it's not really backed by increased energy production in the cells. It's really almost exactly the same because you have more blue light stimulating cortisol, but you don't have the red and near infrared wavelengths, which stimulate mitochondrial energy production and increases in ATP, which are found in daylight. And so employers, Dr. Alexander uses the term light doping. They're, in a way, maybe inadvertently or unintentionally, but light doping their employees. In other words, drugging them with a stimulant to increase their productivity in the short term, which ultimately compromises their health in the long term. And to me, that's like a pretty big deal. I mean, that's like not cool. It's not good for people. And long term, it's not really good for the employers. It's not good for the healthcare system because everybody's getting sick. And you know the rest, right? So that's one of the main issues with modern lighting, is the fact that it's typically enriched with blue light. Now, if you buy warmer lights, you can avoid this. Like if you buy a warm white LED, it has less blue, of course. Then Another issue is the color rendering index. So color rendering index is basically the measure of how well colors are rendered and visible compared to full spectrum daylight. But as a result, it also acts as a proxy for the breadth of the spectrum. So how much of the different colors does it cover, like the sun, all of which have psychological effects. There's an effect from an aesthetic perspective, of course, like for video, photography, and so on. You want the highest CRI possible. If you're looking at a beautiful painting, you won't even see it in its true light if you have low color rendering index in the light sources, which most lighting is terrible. It's like 80 or below. And it's the same of a human face. If you look at a human face in low quality lighting, you don't see the full color of somebody's skin, their full tone, the blushing of their cheeks. People look pale and sickly under these blue enriched lights. So, or even just low color rendering index lights. So that's another issue that has both sort of psychological, aesthetic, but also physiological effects as far as depriving the brain and the body of the proper spectrum of light that is coming out of, the sun normally. And then finally, there's the flicker, which is another major issue, which you mentioned earlier. But this has been shown to cause disruptions in basically the neurons and the way the brain is functioning, alterations in focus, can trigger migraines, and so on. So flicker is another really serious issue, which even lights we've measured that claim to be flicker-free, maybe for example, they use the phone flicker as their standard. Like, if the camera and the phone doesn't see it, then it doesn't exist. But that's not true either, because the camera on a phone, it still has algorithms and things that are trying to filter out flicker. So just because you don't see flicker on a camera doesn't mean it's not there. Although if you do see it on the camera, it is almost certainly there. But just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not flickering. So we have pretty high standards for the kind of lighting we're creating, which would cover these different functions. So yes, the glasses are super helpful and they're great. And they also help because even in 30 or 40 or 50 years, the whole world might not be on healthy lighting. But I would love if it were, but it might not be. So the glasses obviously act as your sort of protection anywhere you go. So that's my view on the glasses, but how they relate to really the kind of lighting crisis that we need to fix.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been off grid, and fortunately I'm going on grid, but I'll have off grid capability by pretty much next year. But that's the tricky thing. I'm probably a small percentage of people that has this concern, but energy efficiency is a real deal for me being fully off grid, even with a robust, massive, battery system. There's still the power usage concern. Even like the incandescent heat lamps, they use 250 watts. And so that's still a lot of power for being, if I have multiple of those going in the house, that's a lot of juice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's a balance. I did interview the sauna space guy, and he made an interesting point that I hadn't heard before of basically the level of light at night of artificial light. Ideally, it's at eye level, like kind of mimicking a bonfire or fire versus overhead. Do you agree with that, or if you?
Yeah, actually, I would. Both, Dr. Jack Kruse and Dr. Alexander Wunsch, and they're in harmony or resonance as far as the perspective that I've heard and read on this topic, which is that the retinal ganglion cells, which sense light for the purpose of stimulating chronobiology and the circadian rhythm, are in the inner retina and kind of the lower portion, physiologically speaking. So that's I'm missing the exact correct term, but for the bottom portion. So in other words, because the sun would never be below the horizon, right? So it can't be, right? It's either horizon or above. And typically it's above, well above the horizon. So the sensors for our circadian stimulus reflect this reality. And so light overhead, any overhead light, Dr. Alexander argues, will have much more of an impact than any light coming from below. Even blue enriched light. Now, this is a study I haven't seen that would be really, really cool to run. If you had blue enriched light, but shown from down below, would it even affect the circadian rhythm at all? I mean, okay, maybe it will a bit just because peripherally it's getting into the eye and it's bouncing off and everything. But would it have nearly as much of an effect as blue light at eye level or above? And so I think Brian's definitely right about that assertion. And any lighting, we're developing, as I mentioned, a lot of different kind of lighting and light ideas and systems. And one consideration is eye level or below lighting. Now, to replace people's bulbs, which everybody wants, not everybody, but most people want, they don't just want to have empty sockets or sockets that they never turn on, or they have guests over for dinner and they don't want to be weird or seem weird, right? So we'll give people a better option for overhead lighting, but in a perfect world, we would have lighting systems that are eye level or below for the evening. And yes, we're working on this kind of thing. So
that's awesome. I might have to hire your consulting because next, through the winter, but probably most likely spring, I'm building out a bunker that'll be 8,000 square feet underground. And I've just been meditating on the lighting for months. And I could totally design it with lighting along the floor throughout it or at level. So I've been thinking about how to do that.
Yeah, we can make it pretty easy for sure. We have some good solutions coming together. So absolutely, I would love to help you with that.
That's cool. I'm definitely going to do, I think they're called sun tunnels or sky tunnels, but there's a bunch of different companies. And I'm sure this gets crazy with the physics of if one's better than the other. But generally, it's like a tube that allows in sunlight and refracts it through like a lens. So it kind of spreads the light down. So whether moonlight or sunlight.
That sounds really cool. Like mirrors, like are there mirrors or something?
I think so.
Light?
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds cool. We'll make the bunker. Do you think you're going to spend a good amount of time there, or is it just going to be like an emergency shelter?
Well, I'm planning it out I'm living in it, but I'm planning it out for the light. I'm very aware of the light, and especially up here in North Idaho with mood and energy and stuff. And so the pyramid that's built into it, I think I sent you a voice message about. I'm making the capstone on it UV allowing. So it's a certain material, acrylic, that allows in UV. And eventually I'll put a ceramic dome on top from a company, GeoShip, that's a startup that's making bioceramic domes starting next year. So mostly like in the day I'll be above ground, and then at night I'll go underground, which will be kind of cool.
I see. That's really cool. Yeah, you'll be charging up.
Yeah. I'm curious how that'll affect my sleep. I think maybe you've talked to Jack or other people about just the whole magnetism aspect of sleeping. And, I sell grounding sheets, and I'm very vocal about rod to earth is the way to go. And I've been grounding like that since 2010. But I think the next level is sleeping like in a basement, right? Or in the earth.
Yeah, it sounds accurate. It's not something I've dove into for quite some time now, but I know a lot of people have benefited from using things like the magnetico sleeping pads, which increase the magnetic field strength under your body. So
maybe what I'm thinking about is making a Faraday cage underground. There was some study, I can't recall right now, but where that disrupted people. But if you're underground or in a under the earth and you're getting all the frequencies and stuff, the Schumann resonance and everything, then that actually is a benefit, and you're kind of shielded from the EMFs and stuff. I was actually going down an Elon Musk rabbit hole last night with David Icke. He was talking about the whole merging with machine thing is the ultimate goal. I think starting by 2030 is like a big date. And I wanted to ask you about that, your thoughts on Starlink. And I've delved pretty deep into Tesla, one of Elon's companies, and it's pretty freaky, the ecosystem, because it's a lot more than people realize. It's energy production from his Tesla's battery system, which is really intimately tied to the electrical grid. So they can you can actually power the grid from that, and that's like part of their thing. But then there's like the humanoid robot, and then there's Starlink, and you add in Neuralink, and it's just getting to this crazy level of like pretty scary integration. And I don't think anybody knows the end game, right, for these billionaires and people at the top. But to me, it doesn't feel good where it's heading. So,
yeah, it's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. To be honest, like looking at the election cycle that just happened and everything going on, and I'm fairly active on X more as a viewer. I don't post a lot, but I just like to read about different things happening. I'm really interested in Bitcoin, at least, yeah, interested and curious. Um, I personally like Elon just from the perspective that he seems to really want to move humanity forward. But of course, we could disagree. Everybody could disagree about like what forward really means and what the right direction is for us to go. And one person's forward might be another person's backwards, let's just say. So I like him as a person, and I like that it at least seems, just from what I've seen. I've never met him, but to want to seemingly restore free speech and give access to people to share ideas like on X that, I mean, as far as I can tell, you literally wouldn't have been able to. I would be pretty concerned for what the world would look like if he had and it wasn't able to kind of spread a lot of good information. I would say mostly good information, or at least truthful information, over the last year or so. And I think the election probably wouldn't have gone the way it had if X wasn't a free platform, like if it was still censored. So for this reason, I really like him and that aspect of what he's doing. I remember years ago, especially when I was really dogmatically following some of the people in the health and wellness space and what they were saying and so on, I was kind of nervous about Elon and what he was doing, with the Starlink and all this, because I was so concerned about all the EMF, and I still am from like a health perspective. But I've started to try to see the value of having internet access for people in developing countries, for remote places, for me, like if I was on a boat or like in the middle of nowhere, to be able to have like Starlink Mini, like that could fit in my backpack and have internet. To me, there's something really cool about that. I wish that people would take the research on EMF more seriously, because I have a hunch that we could create like biocompatible EMF, wavelengths that are supportive. So speaking now about Starlink beyond X, I think we could make bio-friendly or at least bio-harmonious communication devices. But what does concern me is when Elon's on Joe Rogan. I saw a clip recently and he's like, Joe Rogan saying, what about 5G? People are worried about this. And Elon's like, no, he said something like, I could have a belt of cell phones around my brain and I wouldn't be concerned. And what that tells me, as smart of a person as Elon is, he, I guess, isn't familiar with the research that was done, unless he is and he's just ignoring it for some reason. But the research that was done with, for example, by Dr. Andrew Marino and Dr. Robert O. Becker on the effects of EMFs, when EMFs were much less developed than they are. Like it wasn't 5G, it wasn't 4G, it wasn't even 3G. It was like power lines and microwaves and stuff at the time. And then Carlo, I believe the first name is George Carlo, was this guy who worked with the FCC and then basically came out as a whistleblower exposing that the FCC lied about the research they were funding. They were hiding things and so on, manipulating the data. And apparently his house was burned down. I heard that. But more importantly, he was just publicly, completely discredited by the FCC, by Tom Wheeler, who was kind of the dude running the show, who was basically in the revolving door between the industry, the telecoms, and the FCC, the regulatory body. So I guess all that's to say, like, I think Elon, I'd like to believe that if he knew about the research like Robert F. Kennedy does, and they're obviously working together really closely, so hopefully Bobby Kennedy's able to change Elon's mind about that. But I'd like to think that he would be the guy, or at least be a part of innovating healthy EMF solutions. And I think, like, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now with raw optics and lighting, I would be doing that. I mean, like, anybody who says there's no opportunities for new companies or to create something to improve the world, like, I used to think like, oh, everything's already been invented. It's such BS. Like, somebody should figure out how to make healthy Wi-Fi and just teach everybody, just like we've done to a great extent with blue light, like teach a mass market audience of how standard Wi-Fi is bad, and how now obviously the thing is you'd have to get Apple and all the other people involved to make their devices compatible. But anyway, there's a way to do that. So regarding Starlink, I see the positives of having this, for developing countries and remote places and people traveling. But I think it's a huge drawback that these are frequencies that literally have been shown to cause cancer. and all sorts of other issues. And the fact that I get concerned about it sometimes because I use my phone quite a bit, to be honest, when I'm traveling and, Wi-Fi and these different things. And I'm like, I don't want to have tumors all over, or whatever when I'm 40 or 50 or, like younger than I'd never want to have cancer. Right. But it's concerning for me that people are, and myself included, sometimes kind of turning a blind eye to the risks. Like I keep my phone on airplane mode as much as I can and so on. But anyway, so that's about Starlink. Hopefully that changes. And I think, again, Bobby Kennedy should be able to do a good job on that. But let's see. Because he was, before he got, he was talking about vaccines, but he was also talking a ton about EMF. So hopefully he gets into that and doesn't forget about that, let's say, in his new position, as difficult of a issue as that might be to tackle when the public's not even aware of it and everybody loves their phone. But anyway, then the Neuralink stuff and going to Mars and Neuralink, like for me, I don't think I'd ever want to live on Mars. Like, so I think this is where I have a bit of just a personal, not even disagreement, but just I have a different mindset of like what happiness looks like to me. Like I'd rather go live in the Ecuadorian jungle. Like to me, that would be paradise, like somewhere remote, and so on. But I get it. I think there's something very aspirational about Elon wanting to go to Mars and, wanting to make life multiplanetary. If it works, like if we could live like Star Wars, where there's ships and all these different outposts and we could figure out, that would be cool. But I'm still largely inclined towards the, I'll call it the Dr. Jack Kruse philosophy, but it's really the philosophy of many other people that like our bioenergetics and biophysics are tied to the earth. And I'm skeptical that we would survive, that we'd be able to thrive in these foreign environments or even really survive. But let's see how that goes. Again, if Elon even tweeted recently, I think I saw that like even if we don't get to Mars, like just the sheer magnitude of the goal will cause such significant improvements in human technological development and innovation that could benefit like just the stuff that we do that's closer to Earth, like the space, anything in space, any satellites, anything like that, and even just the production of like critical materials and things on Earth. So that's a separate conversation that I want to bring up. But like, if governments just got out of the way, and stop collapsing the currencies and everything, I think humanity would be like so thriving so much. Also, I'm skeptical about that. I personally feel like there's that value. There's a really beautiful value in like our human spirit, right? Our human energy. I've become, again, very interested in spirituality and meditation and very much a spiritual person. And I think having like a chip in my brain connecting me to the internet, and obviously there's the concern about like in a dystopia, how that could easily be used for just complete control. So that would be one major, major concern that you just simply can't overlook. But even if there was some way that it's like guaranteed autonomy where no one can hack your brain and control you, which I don't think that's possible, but let's just say it were, I still don't know if I'd want to have like that, be a part of my life. Like the chip in your brain, it lets you download an entire language in like 5 seconds. I mean, that's tempting because I like learning languages, but then it's like, then I'm not learning the language. Then I'm just downloading the language. You know what I mean? And it's like, but it's interesting though. You could make a similar case for like, my hesitations for Neuralink. You could have made that same case for cell phones. Like, oh, you can look up any information you want in 5 seconds and you can call anyone you want. And if what I'm saying right now is true, then theoretically I would have rejected a cell phone given the choice. But I haven't rejected the phone and I actually like it and use it a lot. So, evaluating my own point, my feeling is that I wouldn't want a chip in my brain. But given the fact that I use a phone pretty regularly, not all the time, but frequently, maybe I might end up saying, yeah, I'll take the chip too, So it's an interesting thing to observe, but I'd like to think that I wouldn't. I'd like to think that I will make the choice to maintain my human autonomy. But again, the phone to a great extent, if you really think about it, like these things, it's not that they totally take away your human autonomy, if you know what I mean, but people are so glued to their phones, myself included, that it's like, I find myself, if I go out without my phone, it feels like I'm lacking something significant, It's like become such a part of, for me at least, my daily routine and things I do and communications. And I think it's that way for like 90+% of people.
Yeah. Well, especially for people like myself that lives alone, rural. I don't have neighbors right next. I mean, they're far away, spaced out. And so I make it a point to, when I'm communicating with other humans, I put my phone away and I don't, look at it for potentially hours. And I feel like that's a true reset. But to me, that's my only connection to the outside world, being out here in the woods. And so it's a huge benefit. Anyway, everything you said, that was great. You're way more optimistic than I am, and I hope you're right, and I hope I'm wrong. I maybe a pessimist, but I tend to look at actions more than words, and there's a lot of promises, and I hope they're being genuine. But I doubt it.
Yeah.
But then again, I hope you're right.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Me too. Relentless optimism is my philosophy. So, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, speaking of the phone, do you think looking, and this is one of the most basic recommendations I see on Instagram or whatever, is never, just for mood and productivity, looking at your phone first thing when you wake up is the worst way to start your day?
I agree. I think it's the worst thing ever. Like I almost never do it except when I have an alarm set, if I want to like wake up even earlier than I'm normally waking up, or if I had a late night, but I want to kind of push my body to get back on the local rhythm, which I do sometimes. Sometimes it's like a balancing game. It's like, okay, if I stayed up late, probably should let myself sleep in and let my body do its thing. But if I, for example, want to get out and surf like really, really early, at first light or something, sometimes I'll use an alarm. But my ideal is to always wake up naturally, right? Anyway, with that being said, and in order to achieve that, as a side note, it goes to the topic of, that I mentioned earlier of like eating with the sun and not eating a big meal too late. I find that if I eat a big lunch and then I fast the rest of the day, I'm going to wake up at like 4 a.m., no problem. But if I eat a bigger, like a later dinner or just any dinner, like I'm going to be a little more sluggish and sleepy. And it's almost like drinking, really. I think the way that the byproducts of food metabolism affect our sleep is comparable to drinking alcohol at a much like lesser scale in a way, but there's some sort of, I don't know exactly what it is, but some sort of toxic byproducts or just something that the body's having to deal with that reduces our regenerative capacity. Anyway, so I've experienced that, at least myself. So it's just speaking from my personal experience there. And I guess it's not mine only, because anybody with an Oura ring can see the same thing and they tell me that they do. So it's a pretty standard thing. Anyway, so let's see. What was the question again? Let's go back.
Well, I know you said you wake up before the sunrise, and
yeah,
like for me, that's not. I mean, I'm kind of in a valley, my current house, and I'm not obviously by the beach. I'm way inland. But if you have access, you would say that watching the sunset is one of the best things you could. I mean, it is the best way to start your day.
Yeah,
sorry, sunrise. Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, so of course, I know what you mean. I'm just touching back on the phone for a moment. I got on a tangent there. So I almost never use my phone other than, like, for example, as I mentioned, for the alarm. But in the morning, if I use my phone, I feel like I've ruined the day. Now there's definitely a psychological element to that. And I wouldn't underestimate the power of psychology in any case. I think it's really powerful. Like if you tell yourself using your phone is going to ruin your day. But for me, what is somebody doing on their phone? You're looking at social media, Instagram, Twitter usually, or responding to messages. So basically, from the perspective of, let's say, somebody like Joe Dispenza, you're just coming out of theta brainwave patterns, or even delta when you're asleep, and up into theta and then waking up. And it's that time when the brain is kind of the most receptive to information, like to different inputs subconsciously, when you're in those early morning hours or whenever you wake up, really. So to go from deep sleep straight to your phone, you're basically immediately programming your brain with who you think you are and all of the connections to the memories and emotions of your past or your familiar life. And so to me, it's like there's the blue light exposure, which if you don't have the night shift mode or the blue blocking glasses, that's an issue by itself. But even if you have that dialed in, which I would, I'd use the color filters mode on the iPhone and make the screen red, use blue blocking glasses, for example. But even with that, I still wouldn't want to use my phone first thing in the morning, especially for those different purposes like social media and stuff and messaging, because it's just an immediate reconnection to a, I would say, manufactured reality. That's not to say that everybody's life and everybody's connection is all manufactured with the people around them. But what I mean is that, like, I really have come to believe from a more spiritual or just, you create your reality kind of perspective that we can wake up every day and to some extent, like, choose who we're going to be, how we're going to act. Like, yeah, okay, if you have like a wife and kids and you live somewhere and you have certain responsibilities, like I have a company that I must attend to, that's not necessarily going to disappear. But I do believe there's a good amount of flexibility. Like, I can choose that I'm going to be somehow like divine. Like, I think you can choose in a day, like I'm going to wake up and like channel some higher energy, some inspiration where everyone I talk to, I'm going to be kind. Everything I do, I'm going to do it well. Everything I think, I'm going to have pure thoughts. Like, I'm going to be grateful for all the opportunities that have come to my plate in this mystery of the universe today. And I think that could be a really great way to start a day. And that's typically how I aim to think. But if you just go straight to your phone, you immediately start pumping out the stress hormones for all the potentially there's some positive situations, which are, good hormone producing and, you'll be happy. But then can be stressful things like who's judging me or who did that or what's going on in the world, like the news. So yeah, I think both in the morning and the end of the day, it's not ideal to spend time on the phone. I have more challenge with the end of the day, like not going on X, for example, before bed. And what I do is I try to, if I want to go on X and like look at what's happening in the world and read about how Bitcoin's, crushing it and micro strategies, buying all this Bitcoin and it's great. Then for me, the best is to do that after I'm done work at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon before the sunset. And then after sunset, which is around 6 here in Bali, just like call it a day and just, not be on my phone. But again, I'm not perfect with that. But in those evening hours, I feel the best. And I like, just like you said, you disconnect for a while. I feel the best and I feel the most grounded and centered and like I'm the leader of my life if I take some time then to journal, maybe read, maybe just sit quietly with myself, have a cup of tea. That's how I prefer to do things. So no phone in the morning, no phone in the evening. And I also have my phone really hacked, so to speak, where like on Instagram, I don't really like scrolling on Instagram anyway, but like I mute basically all the people I follow except
That's what I do too. Yeah.
Yeah, close family members. Exactly. So it's like there's no posts on my feed except close family members. So the only place I can really go to get like dopamine other than just from, the little dopamine I get from family and the closest people I have, like I only have 5 or 6 people unmuted. That's great, but they're not always posting stuff. There's the explore page. And I know the explore page is that's like a rabbit hole, so I avoid it as much as I possibly can. Sometimes I find myself going in there, but I really try to avoid it completely. So there's that. For me, if I am going to scroll on social media, I prefer to do it on X because to me, at least there's some intellectual value. There's current events. There's, much more of that. And so that would be like my drug of choice. But even that I found, at the end of the day, I'm like, how much value is X really adding to my life? Okay, it lets me know that Bitcoin's hot right now. Okay, great. Like I believe in Bitcoin. I'm going to buy it anyway. But it does kind of inform me like, yeah, it's kind of really hot right now. So, you might want to make sure you have a lot before it 10Xs or whatever, for example. To know about the election was really interesting and informative. And I wanted to stay informed and I'm not going to listen to like mainstream media, right? But besides like a couple key things like that, some stuff about Bitcoin, some stuff about the election, I do still feel like for the most part, to me, it's a waste of energy and it's like a drain because I'm like, I'm a happy person. I'm living a great life. I'm running a great business. I'm doing a lot of great things. Like I would rather have like blissful ignorance, honest to God. Like I would rather just like take the information in that I want to take and read the books that I want to read about. I think there's so much to be said for the fact, and maybe you're living this out in the woods, but I think there's so much to be said for the fact that like we can literally create our reality. In other words, like I could sit around doesn't mean that what's happening outside isn't real, but like I could just read books about philosophers that I like and, science fiction and fantasy and whatever it is that, floats your boat. You could just create that world for yourself and exist in it. and like I think to a great extent, be happy. Maybe I was speaking from a very privileged perspective because I have the money to be where I want, be in a safe place, and kind of have my life the way it is. But I think we can, to a great extent, shelter our mind from toxic, negative information. And where somebody would say, no, like you should know all the bad stuff that's happening in the world and the people being raped and molested and the, countries being destroyed by government overreach. But it's like, the question I would ask is like, yeah, I don't want to deny those realities, but it's like, I'd like to think that I'm not the one committing those atrocities, but some people might argue just by being like a privileged person from a Western country, you're somehow involved or implicit in the crime. But anyway, or complicit, I should say. But with that being said, I try to do the best I can to lead a good life and do the right thing. And so I would rather selectively choose to not have information that I find to be poison. Like the question I was getting at before is there really any benefit to like knowing all the bad stuff that's going on in the world? Some people would argue, yes. I don't really think there is.
Yeah, that's a great question. Going back to just like practical stuff too, do not disturb, you're probably on the same thing, but my phone's on do not disturb 99% of the time. And I've been around people where it dings or vibrates. And to me, that's like a tug on the dog leash. Like it's like tugging on the leash whenever your phone dings, vibrates. And it's like nails on a chalkboard for me now when I hear that around somebody, because it's just such a nervous system like stimulus that I never get when I'm home. And I think that's one of the easiest things that people could do to support their health. And yeah, you might annoy people. I do all the time.
Ding, 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 ding. It's not even like one usually.
Someone trying to reach you and send you cat memes or something, or yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So we talked about actually some really good tips already on that front, like muting everybody on Instagram. Like I already try to not follow too many people because like it's just not necessary. But if there's somebody who I like meet and I think they're cool and I want to keep in touch, I'll keep them and I'll follow them and keep it. And every once in a while I'll go through and like clean out people. I'm like, yeah, you're a nice person, but like there's no reason for me to be following you on Instagram. So peace. And I don't care if people unfollow me. Like I try to share valuable content. Like I want to share valuable enough content that people actually see it and they're like, that made my day better. Like that made me a happier, healthier person or whatever, especially considering that the people who are doing this are scrolling on Instagram anyway. So I don't want to have necessarily, I mean, I would be honored if my content and something I'm sharing is so valuable that somebody just follows me on Instagram, just like they're on Instagram just to get the content I'm sharing. But like, I wouldn't want somebody to just be on Instagram, like, and get into that whole rabbit hole just so they could see my content. Like, I'd rather people just go live their lives and be happy, right? But that being said, most people, we both know this, we're fortunate to be exceptional, and I would say individuals who have created our own businesses and do things. Like we get to operate from a bit of a different place. Most people who are working a 9 to 5 and going to the office, Instagram's like a reprieve. It's like a place to go relax, for example. So if we can share higher quality content and information, higher frequency information, that what else is out there, great. But anyway, with that being said, I mute everybody on X. On X, like there's the for you and the following sections, right? There's I think a Bitcoin thing right there. The following, it's like then you have to pick who you're going to follow and just see what they post. I actually like the for you because it brings me stuff I would not see. But again, I have to be careful with it because like then sometimes there's like videos of like a woman getting, or not getting raped, but like a cop saving a woman who's about to get raped, like kind of nasty, just disturbing stuff, which yes, it's reality, but it's just not necessarily something that I feel like I need to be looking at or being aware of. Like it's a shame that these evil things happen in the world, but I think the best we can each do is do the best that we can, literally. Mm-hmm. So that was a very circular thing to say. The best we can do is do the best that we can. Like the best thing we can do is just, I think it's true, do the best that we can. We can show up and be kind and be respectful and be nice and not manipulate people and take advantage of people. I mean, anyway, side note. So back to the do not disturb, like what I do is I have you have focus, they call it now. So you have different focuses. So like I've created a couple different focuses. So for example, this year I traveled a lot with a particular top tennis player because he was using our glasses. And I realized like, dang, when I'm at these events, like if somebody on his team or him sends me a message, I want to know that. So I don't want to be off do not disturb. I just want messages from them. So I created like a tennis focus with all the contacts associated with tennis. So if I know one of the tournaments, the events, I'm going to get all their messages. With Do Not Disturb, I have a list of like 20 people who are allowed. So like top contacts, like really important people, friends, so they can disturb me. Fine.
I have
like
zero.
people who I'm. So that's cool. That's good. And then I created another focus that I call silent. So like silent means nobody's allowed. So like going on silent is great too. But then considering the way my business operates, like there are some people who, if they call me, like somebody who's a really successful, investor and a large company in the Middle East too, is a good friend and also someone who, gives me a lot of direction and advice. It's like, if he calls, I want to answer the phone, right? So there's certain people who are allowed. And then also with Do Not Disturb, you can have it allowed where if somebody calls you twice, like repeat calls are allowed. So if there's an emergency, so I mean, for anybody who's trying to implement this. And then I also learned recently from my team, you can selectively block specific people or chats. So rather than having like selectively allowed, you can also have selectively blocked. And so I tell my team, because I use iMessage for work, I just can't deal with Slack and these like crazy channels with so much going on. So I'm like, we use iMessage, but I'm like, please block me on the weekends. Like I'm going to work on Saturday and Sunday sometimes, but just block me because you don't need to get my messages on the weekend. Like I don't want my team working all weekend. So anyway, so yeah, good. We just got some really good actionable tips. And I'm just glad you brought it up because it blows my mind. Like I just have to tell you how much I agree with you. When you're around like a normal person whose just phone is dinging constantly, I'm like, how do you get anything done? Like, how do you even live? And then, I mean, I'm amazed perpetually. Like, I go sit at a cafe in Bali, and a lot of the people who come here are pretty amazing people, like who have figured out how to make some money or, done something cool and they have some freedom. Not everybody, but I'm often amazed at humanity, like inconsiderateness, unfortunately, like, or just how people sit and seemingly do nothing. Like just, you see a lot of people who are just chilling and doing nothing. And I'm like, that's fine. I actually see a lot of value in relaxing, but especially for guys where our work is like our purpose is such an important part of our identity. I think for women, depending on the woman and her inclination towards masculine or feminine traits, maybe it's obviously it depends, but for a woman who's really inclined towards femininity, not feminism, but femininity, she will maybe find more fulfillment in like her family and her kind of caretaking functions or parts of life. But for guys, I think in particular our career and what we're doing, our mission is such a critical driver. Again, for some women too. But to see people who like just do nothing, I'm like, how do you what do you do with yourself all day? Like I don't get it. Like ding, ding, ding on the phone. Anyway, all right, I got to get off the soapbox.
I agree. Well, I want to switch gears, and you mentioned with Alexander. I guess I've been butchering his last name. You pronounce it differently from how I say it, but I'll say
well, Wunsch would be like American Wunsch, but Wunsch is like it's like a V in German.
Wunsch.
So Wunsch.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Alexander Wunsch. So you said you were developing light therapy devices, and living somewhere where, I mean, right now the UV index is 1, and it's going to be that way until, I think, late March or something. I really use a lot of red light therapy devices, and I think I've been using them since, I don't know, 2016, 2017. And lately, I think in the last year-ish, I've been getting into narrowband ultraviolet, UVB, UVA therapy, which has been kind of a game changer for me. And like I said, I was listening to your chat with him, and you guys went pretty deep into ultraviolet, and you asked him about vitamin D supplementation and stuff. I'm actually measuring my vitamin D using spectrophotometry. I don't know if you've heard of the Oligo scan.
Well,
people are probably annoyed of hearing me talk about it because I just like to get people's thoughts if they've tried it, and a lot of people have. And I think Mercola's been using it for like 12 plus years, but it shines light into 4 points on your hand. And it's not a quantum thing. It's a physical process where this guy made reference ranges, a Brazilian guy. I think it took him like over a decade, and it shows you all your metals, not all the elements, but a lot of the vitamins. It doesn't show like vitamin E or K, unfortunately, or no, it doesn't show vitamin K, but it shows E, A, D. And my vitamin D has been consistently low, and it's showing in the tissue. And so my little personal experiment is being more consistent with UVB narrowband 311 and seeing what that does to my tissue vitamin D levels. Because I don't like needles. You know, I'm a kind of a biohacker, but I don't test. I don't like getting stuck with needles and say, "Oh, you're not a true biohacker." It's like I think there's other ways to test besides blood tests.
I'm with you.
Generally. But anyway, where I'm going with that is, just your thoughts on like my situation. Like I know Vunch was saying that there's naturally a dip in vitamin D in the winter, and to him that's normal because it's like it's made for like a summer kind of hormone.
This is I'm really much more inclined towards his perspectives these days compared to a lot of other people I followed and work that I followed. He's, as I mentioned from earlier on in this podcast, he's able to explain complex topics in such a simple way, which to me is the greatest mark of understanding. And I've tried to, and I am beginning to work on a bit of a curriculum with him, both for myself and then something that we could pass to others, like a real sort of science of light overview and then deep dive. And he gave me a ton of different books to consider reading and to look at, few of which I've been able to really dive into as much as I'd like. Then he kind of added the caveat, like, but they don't all necessarily put it together properly. So then we have to talk about it. And I'm thinking, geez, why don't I just start interviewing you and just asking all the questions? Because that'll be a lot more efficient. And that's what he and I started to do with that podcast interview. Because I'd spend probably months, maybe years reading all these books and then trying to get the nuances that he's evolved in his own understanding, which quite frankly, I have not found anybody else who has that level of nuance in their perspective. And so I think he is like a one of one expert when it comes to light. And I think it's really important for me, and this is my kind of self-appointed task and role, to extract as much of the knowledge that he's put together and synthesized in his mind as possible. I mean, I look at his bookshelf and it's like all of the books, and many of which are in German and haven't been translated to English because so many of these researchers were German. So with that being said, when it comes to vitamin D, I would agree with his perspective naturally that it's a summer hormone. And so it's okay that it goes down in the winter. Now, how much? I'm not sure, to be honest. How much is acceptable? Because I've understood that we're supposed to have some stored in our fat. I believe that's the case. And so, maybe we use a little bit throughout the winter. This is honestly not something I'm deeply familiar with. But in general, it makes sense to me. I have to disclose, I maybe should have disclosed this in the beginning, like I've gotten less and less interested personally in reading every single new paper, reading every single book, listening to every single podcast. Like what I came to understand myself is that, I had this experience that showed me this different level of understanding from the typical Western medicine, naturopathic medicine, or even diet. And I've gotten a pretty firm understanding of circadian rhythms and light and so on. Of course, I want to continue to learn more, but I don't like the obsession on, that so many people in the health and wellness world have on constantly taking in all the new information about everything. To me, it kind of goes to what I was saying about the general information overload from society and Twitter and so on. I just don't feel that it's for me and that it would even be beneficial for me to try to understand everything about everything. Like I'd rather just let the other experts be the experts in all their fields. Huberman can be the guy who's the expert in a couple things and knowledgeable about a bunch of other stuff. And then there's experts that he interviews about every topic. But it's like, I found that for me, the information about light that I call the light diet works really well. These simple steps, watching the sunrise, seeking natural light during the day, minimizing artificial light during the day, eating with the sun, sunbathing, sleeping with the sun, or watching the sunset, sleeping with the sun. Filtering artificial light at night, and then cultivating our inner light. I think that's 10 steps. Still kind of fleshing that out. But like, if I do those things, I'm good. Like, I really don't know if I need to know much more. It's almost like a scientific simplicity. It's like, all right, I've gotten the science, I've dove in. Do I really need to go crazy? Like, there are people who never do any of that stuff. They never learn any of it. They just live their intuitive, healthy lifestyle. on the Mediterranean Sea or whatever, and they live till 100 or more, right? So like, I think I know enough to know that I know what I know and maybe don't want to know everything. Just for example. And then there's the light diet. Then there's this, as I mentioned, doctor friend of mine who studied in India for many years and was going to be a yogi, and effectively is a yogi, but I should say was going to be a monk, renunciate, ended up having a family and getting married, but still living very much like a yogi, waking up at 3 a.m., meditating for hours, doing a lot of physical training as well, working as a doctor, Ayurvedic doctor. And so between my understanding of the science and what I call the light diet, which has been informed by both the science and the ancient Ayurvedic wisdom, I trust him and what he shares. So if I have questions about some topic, I'll ask him, because in Ayurvedic medicine, the doctors they're not just a doctor, they're a nutritionist, they're a psychologist, they're a physiologist or physiotherapist. So they're, knowledgeable about exercise and training and fitness. And so for me, that's great. And then finally, if I add on top of that, some of the spiritual wisdom and teachings I've learned, like the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and how we can use our mind to change our reality, essentially, including the physiology. I mean, I'm not sure if you've actually seen any of his work lately, but they're actually doing, and not to add any information overload to your plate of stuff that doesn't interest you, only if it interests you, but they published some amazing research on the effects of meditation. Like they do blood draws at their week-long retreats and all sorts of other tests, and they actually definitively showed that meditation can basically increase a massive host of health markers. Like you close your eyes, you're in a dark room, nothing's changing, you're just changing your mind. And they have control groups, obviously. Like they've published the largest study, I think, ever on meditation in a reputable journal with a top researcher. So anyway, like that's another, like I'll call it, realm of information that I subscribe to and believe in, that I can use my mind to create the life that I want, whether it's with my business, with a relationship, with my health, the ability to travel a lot, which I enjoy without compromising my health too much. And then finally, the evolution of that, the spiritual teachers like Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote the autobiography of a yogi, which I read that and I became interested in the Kriya Yoga techniques that they teach about, and went and even did an initiation and practiced some of these yoga techniques on a almost daily basis. I'm like, okay, I feel like I have, between all those things I just shared, like I'm happy with the information I have. And what I want to do then is take this information that I know, especially when it comes to light, circadian rhythms, light therapy, the problems with artificial lights, and make it like practical. I want to take that and go out. And so this is a long way of saying, like, I'm less and less finding myself like a sort of research scientist studying every different paper and knowing all the different mechanisms and everything. I'm like, I know what I know, and I know that there's a serious issue with lighting today, and we need to fix it. And I want to just focus on that. So that's really where I'm putting all of my efforts. So I've become much more of like an entrepreneur, let's say. But I don't think of it like I'm doing it to make money. I think of it like problem solving. And that's very different from, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was much more interested in like geeking out about the mechanisms and stuff, which don't interest me as much now,
I think that's really cool. Yeah. And living by experience too, and just being the example and literally living it. I think that's more powerful than knowing all the dates and the studies and the researchers. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned meat earlier and you mentioned Ayurveda a few times. I sell Shilajit. I've been on Shilajit since probably 2011, almost daily. And that's like a cornerstone Ayurveda. And I know there's other Chayawan Prash I've messed around with, and there's other cool things in Ayurveda. I know you did a vegetarian experiment, and I was vegetarian 8 or 9 years. I tried vegan, vegetarian back and forth 4 times. And I just felt like my hormones were lacking. Testosterone was lower. I just didn't have like, not only like physical strength, but like strength in life without eating red meat specifically. Lately, I've been on a fish kick. So I'm just eating fish and wild rice every single night from Seatopia and loving that. Different fish. I'll kind of alternate, but kind of a boring diet currently. But I'm curious, when you stopped the vegetarian experiment, what was your experience? Because I know you were, I think, trying to get a lot of energy from literally from the sun, right? If I remember right.
Yeah. So it's interesting since becoming more interested in Ayurveda and following this doctor I work with, I shifted, and this happened largely in tandem with becoming more and more interested in meditation and spiritual practices. But I shifted more and more towards just a more plant-based diet. And I was very skeptical in the beginning of anything plant-based, of course, coming from the world of paleo, carnivore, keto. I thought that vegan, like anybody who raises a child vegan is like a child abuser and all this stuff, which in many cases still would be true because most people don't do it properly. The carnivores come after me like, oh, it's impossible to do a vegan diet properly. But I'm still mostly on, I would say, a plant-based diet. But so the way it evolved was, I was super skeptical. And then I was struggling so much in my life with everything I was doing, which I was following, the work of people like Dr. Jack Kruse and the carnivores and this and that, and not really feeling the way I wanted to feel. So one of my approaches to that was to do all the meditation stuff and get into that, which for me was absolutely life-changing. Like, simple as people ask, well, what changed when you started doing Joe Dispenza stuff? I was like, well, I was miserable and now I'm really happy. Like day to day, I just feel really good inside and I like love what I'm doing. And yes, some days I don't feel as good as other days, or even some days I maybe feel bad, but like usually I can see why. Usually it's like if I drank coffee or if I consumed alcohol, coffee makes me anxious. Alcohol makes me feel depressed. Like, you get really sensitive and these things like start to affect you a lot. And these are things most people consume every day. So anyway, then everything makes a lot of sense. But in other words, why so many people are so depressed and anxious. Yeah. But there's more to it than just coffee and alcohol, but they're significant factors for sure. So anyway, all that's to say, nicotine, which is something I enjoy every once in a while, but it also kind of makes me feel quite a bit funky now that I feel my system is very sensitive. Doesn't mean I never use it, but because I do have to say enjoy it, but it's not something I think I should enjoy. Like, how do I say this? I don't think it's the best thing to use a lot of. But
when's the last cigar you've smoked?
I could have not smoked a cigar in like ages. Maybe something we could do together sometime. I think that'd be fun. Honestly, my guilty pleasure is like hookah, shisha. The kind of Arabic approach to tobacco. But even that, like if I do it, I'm like, okay, I'm good for months. But anyway, so let's see. I naturally, as I was meditating more, I just found myself less and less interested in heavy red meat in particular, like what I find to be, just heavy, any red meat. I eventually just stopped eating it. So to be honest, I haven't eaten red meat in years. Years. Yeah. I mean, I haven't eaten it consistently in years. I've had occasionally some red meat, but it's interesting for me because like I used to eat a pound of grass-fed ground beef every day. Every single day I would eat a pound, like half a pound for breakfast, half a pound for dinner. And that was just my life. So somehow I lost the interest in this. I don't know why. I really do believe it has to do with like the meditation between Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's not like a vegan or vegetarian. He talks plenty about he likes his meat, and he says you don't have to be vegan and vegetarian to benefit from meditation, which I totally believe. But I do think some people, especially if you go into like more of the Eastern traditions, some people may find that they lose some interest in red meat. But I have no judgment of anybody eating red meat. Like I think everybody should do what works for them. So that was my experience. Was I found less and less interest in red meat, and it just doesn't interest me anymore. I still eat chicken and or fish with some frequency, like probably twice a week. And I'm curious to see if I keep doing my meditative practices, if I actually maybe lose my interest in those as well. I'm not sure I will. I'm not necessarily trying to, but it's something that's interesting for me. But to try to approach this from another perspective, because I think people look at like not eating meat or chicken or fish or eggs or whatever. I also eat, eggs and dairy. I really like dairy. I really like yogurt and cheese. Although I think my body might not like it as much because sometimes I'll get a bit congested. I think, it's known that dairy for some people causes increased mucus production. That might be due to other issues in the body that need to be worked out. But anyway, or genetic, I really don't know. But all that's to say, another way to look at this is like the perspective of the light diet, of what I call the light diet, is that I've come to believe that theoretically, like we really could live more and more on energy. And I know, you're into this at least to some extent. Like I believe we really could live more on not just sunlight energy, but what the ancients called prana or chi, or what they're now calling life force energy. and that we're getting life force energy from the ground, from earthing, from grounding, from just literally the space around us is rich, as Joe Dispenza will say, with energy and frequency. Like there's, tons of energy and frequency around us at all times, solar energy, but cosmic energy, and so on. So I'm really interested, and I believe this is where meditation practices and techniques, like whether it's Kriya Yoga or some kind of other techniques or Joe Dispenza techniques, like where we can really build up our energy in our chakras and our energy system and be able to basically feed off cosmic energy. Now that sounds fairly woo-woo because it is. I'm not going to claim that that's a scientifically based thing right now, but I would bet that if they did a study on meditators, people who meditate, they would need less food. Like meditators would consume less food because their body is in more balance. There are reports of that within the Dispenza community, but again, I'm not going to claim it's like the science-based stuff because it's just anecdotal situations. But so anyway, all of that's to say, I'm laying the foundation here for if it's truly possible to live more and more on light energy or some kind of cosmic energy that isn't food energy, chemical energy, then I would say that a vegetarian plant-based diet is like more that direction because where you're able to transmute what I wouldn't deny is a nutritionally inferior diet into a human into a living, functioning, highly functioning human organism. And my whole perspective of diet was really blown when I met this Ayurvedic doctor. His name's Balarama, who I've referred to numerous times. He took a Hindu name after living in India for many years. But I met this guy, and he was like one of the most ripped, like really fit, an Ironman triathlete. And I know there's always exceptions, right? So I'm not saying just one person because they can do it. It means it invalidates a whole system. But to see somebody who is a really robustly, physically healthy vegan, it blew my brain. I was like, that just can't be possible because most vegans are emo and sickly and dying. So like, it's not possible. So there must be something off here. But eventually I came to believe like, wait, in following with the light diet principles, if somebody's energetic field were so robust, like if they had mastered their energetic field, that they could theoretically live on either no food or less food and still function equally as well as somebody eating meat or even better. Because then I would add that I do believe there's a cost that comes with eating a lot of red meat, which is a bit of, maybe not for everybody, but heaviness and potentially like more anger, aggression, and depression that come with, I think, as a natural cost of consuming like animals raised for slaughter and like flesh. Now, again, a carnivore, and you might disagree, feel free, but like I just have a personal feeling. This is what the ancient Ayurvedic wisdom also says about eating meat consumption. Like the people who are authorized, let's say, or should eat red meat according to Ayurvedic wisdom are like the Kshatriya class, so the warrior class. So people who should go out and kill, like they should have that like power. But I don't think that for me, that's like something I want. I'm not saying that anybody who eats meat wants to kill people, but like I'd rather have a more, I think, what I would consider like balanced state of mind, peaceful state of mind. And then, yeah, I think people who need to eat meat, like another great example that I would bring, and I know this can be controversial, I'll be really interested to get the feedback from this part of the interview in particular, but I really believe that most carnivores are like, Lord Voldemort. Did you ever watch Harry Potter?
Yeah.
So in Harry Potter, okay, you did. That's even better, right? So in Harry Potter, Lord Voldemort, for those who don't know, is this sort of evil figure who basically kills a lot of people and all this bad stuff, but he is the arch nemesis, kind of the evil guy in the whole series. And so he tried to kill Harry Potter, and Harry's mother's love for him. If you haven't seen Harry Potter or read it, I'm spoiling it right now, but his mother's love for him protected Harry. And so Voldemort went into this like purgatory where he wasn't fully alive, but he wasn't fully dead. He had to live on somebody else's energy. And he had to live on unicorn blood in one of the movies. And that's what, to me, the carnivores are. I'm just being completely serious. I'm not exaggerating at all. Like for whatever reason, their energy field, their psyche, their something, I don't know if it's because they're in chronic stress or survival, or there's, in the toxic modern environment, I'm not saying it's one individual's fault that they have this experience, but there's so many toxins in the modern environment that in order to have health, they need to subsist on the life force energy of another organism which is closer to us. So I think I really have come to believe that the people who have the most robust management of their energy field will be able to take, like, again, lower consciousness foods like plants and these kinds of things and transmute them into human life and intelligence. Whereas the people who have the greatest challenge, whatever the reason for that, would require red meat to thrive. I mean, and it might sound like a bit of a stretch, but especially one more, I think, worthwhile point to make, Matt, is, if you look at the carnivores who are super sick, right? I'm talking like exclusive carnivore, right? Don't eat anything else. They're afraid of spinach because it has oxalates, and they're afraid of whatever else. Like, our bodies are supposed to be resilient. No, like, we've survived like billions of years of biological evolution. Like, you should be able to handle some oxalates, right? Or some whatever, that foods that people have eaten for a long time. Granted, I know they were prepared properly and soaked and this and that, and we should do that. Why not, right? Like, I don't eat, toxins just for fun, but we should be able to be resilient. And so if a carnivore comes in and says, this is really the important point, disregarding everything I've already said so far, if you disagree, but this is a hard one to deny. If a carnivore eats spinach or a sweet potato or a blueberry, all foods that I've heard cited by top carnivore leaders in the space for triggering their immune system or their gut issues, and that single blueberry or sweet potato or spinach or whatever plant toxin triggers your immune system and causes a severe immune reaction, and somebody else can eat that same food and not have a problem. Is the problem the spinach or the blueberry or the sweet potato, or is the problem something with you? And it's with you. It's not the spinach, the blueberry, and the sweet potatoes. But so people like try to pin and blame everything outside of themselves without evaluating their own issue. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's not real and true, that somebody gets an immune system flare triggered by consuming a plant toxin. I'm not saying they should consume the plant toxins if it's what's causing it. But to blame it and say that's the problem, and that just by avoiding all those foods for the rest of your life, you're healed, is just complete nonsense. And so I think people need to seriously evaluate, like, what's going so wrong in my body, my health, my environment, my mind, whatever, that's causing me to not be able to consume normal foods that humans have eaten for thousands of years. Maybe it's glyphosate. Maybe it's all the poisons in the agricultural stuff. And, that's part of why I don't like being in the United States. Like, when I'm in Europe, for all the communist craziness in Europe, they have a lot of things that are banned that are allowed in the United States, right? And similarly in a lot of other countries. So that I like to spend time with. They have more natural food. So anyway, that's my rant about the carnivore diet. I'm not fully, as I said, I'm not fully vegetarian or vegan. I do really enjoy some eggs, some cheese, some chicken, some fish here and there. But I really prefer, like, I eat soy. I mean, not a ton, but like I'm okay with some tofu or something like this sometimes, right? I'm not afraid of it. Like, I don't think it's going to make me grow breasts, like, I think we can handle a bit of soy. Yeah, ideally it's organic. That's crazy. I can't believe I'm saying this because, people are super like, oh my God, soy. Oh my God, it's going to kill me. But like, I like chickpeas. I like hummus. I like falafels. I eat like a lot of plant proteins. And I feel great. I mean, like,
nutrition's become political, just like everything else, like electric vehicles. Like, I mean, everything's become political, and diets are no exception. What you said about the depression and the anger in eating meat is fascinating to me, because I agree, for sure. And I think there's a better way to you can call it kill or process animals instead of a bullet or a knife. And old school farmers will say, well, the animal will surrender and it completely gives up and it's ready to, when I'm holding it and I have the knife to its throat, there's a surrender moment. I'm like, okay, but it's still a knife. It's still like slitting the throat, and it's still a bullet, whether you're a hunter or you're processing your own cattle. I've always looked at CO2, well, not always, but since probably 2012, I looked at carbon dioxide putting animals to sleep. And I'd like to try this on my new mountain. It's definitely a goal in my life, which sounds kind of weird, but it pretty much puts the animal to sleep and they don't experience pain before they die. So it's the most peaceful death. It's how, if there was a serial killer that was going to take me out, I would prefer he puts me to sleep before he kills me. And I think there's a certain energy there that's different from a violent, blunt force trauma or a slit or a bullet. So my point is, I think there are better ways to do things, and people fight that because of the traditional argument. But I don't know. I tend to be more futurist than traditional. Definitely a blend, but I think there is room to improve.
Yeah, you and Elon. No, just kidding. Funny. The futurists, but yeah, of course, there's different types of futurists, right? For healthy, sustainable agriculture and Neuralink, it's a different conversation. I'm just joking, tying our conversation together. But I would want to add one more thing about the meat and vegetarian conversation. Like, again, I don't judge anybody eating meat. I think people should do what's right for them. And it's interesting because a lot of people judge people who choose to be vegetarian or whatever. But anyway, maybe I'd like to think with my relentless optimism that it's out of genuine concern for my well-being, not just because they want to attack me. But anyway, the more I've thought about it, like, and again, this is coming from somebody who's not fully vegetarian or vegan yet. So it's not like I'm trying to speak from a place of moral superiority, but the more I think about it, like just the idea to me of like raising an animal for slaughter, it just feels a little bit funky. Like, because we're animals too. Like theoretically, there could be a superior predator who raises humans.
Interdimensional, or I've heard that theory. Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah.
And they could be raising us for slaughter. Yeah. And it's like, I wouldn't want to be raised for slaughter. And of course, the best argument I think a carnivore could make against this, what I'm saying is like, well, yeah, but plants have consciousness too, which is that they do. This is really interesting. They do. But so the argument from Ayurveda is that the best thing is to eat the lowest consciousness food because it has sort of the least karmic implications. So, animals are much more conscious than plants. Like there's no really getting around that. Doesn't mean plants aren't conscious, but so the idea of just raising an animal for slaughter, even if it's killed in a peaceful way, which of course I think is much better, like way better, because you're going to not get as much of the energy of the stress and the fear. But still, like raising this conscious living being just to kill it and eat it, I'm like, I just feel like we could do better than that. I mean, maybe not. So again, the carnivores were arguing, no, we must eat the flesh from the animals themselves. Like we humans cannot subsist on like plant proteins and things like this. I'm not saying, by the way, everybody should eat what's it called, Beyond Burgers. I mean, that stuff's disgusting. That is not that. There's nobody I think who knows about nutrition who would recommend that. Like, if I'm eating plant proteins, it's going to be like more traditional stuff, like legumes, literally, stuff like this, and grains that have more protein in it. And I'll even, and this is a contentious topic as well, but like I'll even have some plant protein powder, which, yeah, you could argue it's definitely dead food. It doesn't have that life force energy compared to like meat, or even maybe some plants with plant protein in them. But I've come to the perspective, and I could be wrong, super open to being wrong, that like, again, if we incorporate those raw materials into our organism and we have a really robust energy field, then we can utilize them in a positive way. So anyway, food for thought there. We could probably go on for hours about this stuff, but anyway, those are my thoughts on my current thoughts on the topic, and I'm sure they'll evolve over time. But I think it's just interesting, and it's been fun to go a different direction, which is typically how I do, and I know it's how you do too. From the like crazy, like everybody's a carnivore, you got to eat liver all day long, and testicles, and kidney, and heart, and I like going a slightly different direction, or a significantly different.
No, I love it. I'm glad that we went down this little rabbit hole. And yeah, look up so Maurizio Luca, 1990, is Italian. He invented essential amino acids, but it's a specific ratio. I think they're derived from fermented lentils. Like if I was an astronaut, I could live exclusively on this as my only source of protein, and they've actually proven that in studies. So it's a patent 5132113 if anyone wants to look it up. But fascinating. You can find the PDF online, and I've been on that. I mean, there's various companies selling it, but to me, that stuff is the best. I mean, it prevents muscle wasting.
Luca Moretti? No, Mauricio Luca, you said.
Yeah, it's Master Amino. I have no financial affiliation, by the way, and they don't even have an affiliate program. But masteraminoacidpattern.com, and then it's the FAQ, and then you could see the patent there and see the scientific publications and whatever.
Wow, thank you. I'm going to try that. This is great, man. This is
I mean, it's futurist stuff. I mean, it's totally, you're going to get all your protein from a tablet. That's unnatural. It's like, well, it depends on the situation to me. So I mean, it makes veganism possible. If somebody wanted to do it.
Yeah, I think veganism is definitely it's easier. Like modern technology, let's say, makes it possible to do it today. Like where if you were vegan, 100 years ago, or a couple hundred years ago, like I wouldn't argue that you're not going to have some consequence compared to like from a physical health perspective compared to somebody who's eating a ton of meat. Like the person who's eating a ton of meat is probably going to be stronger and like maybe more in a sense robust. But like I've been mostly vegetarian, not completely, and I'm stronger than I've ever been. I'm doing quite a bit of training. I'm surfing a lot. I feel amazing. I'm quite physically fit and active. I can hike a volcano that takes most people 6 or 8 or 10 hours, especially the big meatheads who are covered in muscle who aren't very efficient. And I can do it in 3, so like less than half, just like moving fast, like a really, really difficult hike on Bali. So anyway, yeah, this is great. I'm really glad we've been able to touch on all of these different topics, and it definitely shouldn't be 3 years till our next conversation, maybe 6 months, a year at most.
I agree. Do you have like 5 minutes for a rapid fire Q&A? Because we didn't ask the things that we didn't talk about and the most interesting ones. So
yeah,
okay. Thoughts on deuterium depleted water? I've had a few shows with light water, I think 2 or 3 or something, Victor Saglovsky, and that's all my cats drink. I ozonate it. I'm hoping they live into their 30s. Be kind of cool.
Yeah, I think from what I've gathered, it seems like a good idea. But I would say I'm not an expert in it. I think the light diet, so like lower calorie consumption, is probably the best way to reduce our deuterium because the mitochondria work better so they can process deuterium out versus just reducing the deuterium through the water we're consuming. And also just caloric restriction. So by living on more light, let's call it, and having more balanced system, we will consume fewer calories, which is, I believe, the number one most clearly proven thing that anyone can do to increase lifespan is reducing caloric intake. So yes, I think deuterium depleted water can be good, but it's really expensive. And I think just like fasting more or eating less at the right time, as per the light diet, eat with the sun, is probably as effective, maybe even more effective. But why not do both if you want to?
That's awesome. Yeah, because does light itself deplete certain wavelengths, deplete deuterium?
This I'm not sure about, but I know Dr. Cruz talked quite a lot extensively about, from his perspective at least. I'm not sure if this is the be all end all truth, but that, improving just as a fact, when you improve mitochondrial function, you're naturally reducing deuterium levels in the cells because of the way they work. So like being exposed to red and near infrared light is optimizing mitochondrial function and helping them keep deuterium out of the system.
That makes sense.
And out of the places of the system.
Mm-hmm. What are some tips on getting through the winter in northern climates? Like what would you do if you're Minnesota, North Idaho, Montana?
I would do what you're doing, actually. Like I would be using red light therapy. I wouldn't worry. I would make sure I'm getting a lot of light during the summer and getting vitamin D and trying to get a tan. But then during the winter, I wouldn't worry too much about that. And I would be using red light therapy. I would be using saunas, especially like sauna ice bath combos. I would have high quality lights, which are, lights like what we're working on with raw optics in the house, or at least candles at night. Those are the main things I would do. And also like get out, because it's not, unless you're in the Arctic Circle, it's not like it's dark the whole day. So if you can get out for like an hour walk, you're going to get a fair bit of light still. The sky's still light. It's just gray and covered. I grew up in Philadelphia, so it's like pretty gray for most of my winters as a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because is it the near infrared that still peeks through the clouds? Right.
Yeah, the water still reduces infrared. I mean, water reduces infrared considerably. There's still some, but there's still blue light, which also helps to stimulate, of course, the rhythm in the natural way. That's the key thing from like artificial lights are unnatural way of doing it. And sunlight is what we've evolved our systems adapted to.
Awesome. So does he recommend sleeping grounded in 2024?
I'm skeptical of the grounding sheets. I did use one years ago. My concern was like that they could pick up uh
Mm.
kind of
Electric
different
fields and mhm.
yeah, electric fields and things. So I would be very personally very careful with that because for that specific reason. Because if you don't know what's in the environment, the last thing I would want to do is increase what you're exposed to. So that's one I'd have to say. Maybe if you're in the forest, yes. But if you're in a city or a really busy area, I would lean towards not doing it. And I don't have a grounding sheet with me right now, so I just spend as much time as I can in the ocean and going barefoot. And then I'm not sleeping grounded technically where I am here, but I'm in a lower EMF environment. And so overall, I think it nets out to my benefit.
Kind of an offshoot, just question for me. Like if someone's in a Miami, like I have a friend down there, Jordan, he's in a high rise apartment, and I told him about the magnetico. And generally, people go for either like a Faraday canopy around the bed. I think that's the go-to. But I've been telling people the magnetico is better. What would you say in that situation if someone's on the 18th floor or 40th floor in a high rise in a populated city,
Yeah,
magnetico or Faraday canopy or none?
just this is just purely going off of like my feeling plus what I've heard and seen from other people because I haven't experimented in that situation myself. But I would probably lean towards the Magnetico because it has been it's it there. I've spoken to a lot of people who I know who use them and have benefited from them, especially in the Dr. Jack Kruse community. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. The Faraday cage also, I think, makes sense if you're exposed to huge amounts of cell phone radiation. But I would be concerned. You mentioned this earlier of not having the Schumann resonance. But if you're in such a high EMF environment, it might be kind of drowned out anyway. It's not something I've measured. I'd be curious if like you can measure the Schumann resonance when you're in a really high EMF environment, or if it's just kind of drowned out by all the 5G, 4G. So yeah, if I were in a high rise in Miami, I'd probably do both. I'd probably get a Magnetico and get a Faraday thing and then test like with and without the Faraday thing and see how I feel. And I'd probably do the Magnetico anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really happy I interviewed Dean Bonley before he passed, and I didn't really get the details on how he passed, but it was so sad. And I still want to visit one of his facilities that he set up, like the huge magnetic device that supposedly like
Yeah.
filled in a girl's brain that got eaten by a parasite. Like crazy stories in some of his YouTube lectures of miraculous seemingly healing with that strong
Wow.
induced magnetic field. And I think you couldn't park cars close to the facility because it would like pull them or affect them.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. I mean, it seems like a really cool, I mean, it's a great, again, as I said, I haven't used the Magnetico extensively, but I think this guy, Dean, was onto something for sure. So I think that's a great thing for people to do if they're in a high rise. I would do that if I had to live in a city.
Yeah, it's a few more. Should you put red lens glasses on before bed in the summer, even if it's still light outside?
That's such an interesting question. I had the same dilemma. I was in Finland this summer and it was like light until midnight, and so I'm like, what do I do? My feeling was yes, because yeah, technically, if you're trying to be aligned with the external circadian rhythm, like then you wouldn't because you would just have the light, but then you'd only be sleeping for 3 hours, and then you'd be sleeping for like 18 hours in the winter, or at least quite a lot longer. So to me, it makes sense to use as like, thinking of modern technology, like using blue blocking lenses in the evening to wind down so you can get, maybe you need less sleep, maybe you only need 5 or 6 or so hours compared to 8 or whatever in the winter. But I would use the sunset lenses myself in the evening so that I could get tired and sleep a full night and still be up pretty early if I were in, Russia or Finland or somewhere really far north where it doesn't get dark until late, or Alaska.
Yeah. Awesome. A lot of blue blocking questions. So I'm just going to try to consolidate them into kind of one. Someone asked, does it have to be colored lenses for blue blocking to work properly? And I think people are still learning the difference between there's like clear, yellow, orange, red. And my understanding is the clear ones, they can help with flicker depending on the brand. And then yellow, correct me if I'm wrong, yellow blocks roughly 50% of blue light usually, and then orange more, and then red even more. Is that kind of.
Yeah, so I'd say first on the clear ones, I don't think they can really help with anything, even like flicker, definitely not. Because the flicker, like a physical filter wouldn't change the flicker coming from the light. So that's one thing. The clear lenses block like short wavelength light below 420 nanometers, but that's not really the concerning range for LEDs and screens. So basically, I wouldn't use a clear lens at all. They're actually a huge gimmick. That's like what we're kind of trying to teach people is the clear lenses, they don't block any of the range emitted by modern LEDs and screens. So they're just blocking below 420 nanometers, but screens and LEDs don't even start emitting until around 430. So you could wear a clear lens and it blocks one part of the blue light spectrum, but that's not the part of the spectrum that's emitted by the problem devices and lights today. So clear lenses are off the table. The yellow, our yellow actually blocks 90-ish% of all blue light, even maybe a bit more. But the main purpose of that is, I'm talking overall blue light, but around the range of concern, which the yellow lenses address, which is the reactive oxygen species production range, which is around 420 to 450. That is what the yellow lenses, ours block effectively 100% in that range. So the short range of blue light. Then the sunset lenses, so our kind of lenses, which are closer to red, but they're kind of like a deep red-orange. These are focused on addressing the range of blue light that stimulates melanopsin, the circadian rhythm. So melanopsin is the pigment which in the eye, which receives blue light. And that peak absorption is around 480 nanometers. So we want to block everything, say, from 450 to 510 and even a bit beyond to have the maximum suppression of that stimulus. And so that's why the sunset lenses, they block well into the green range, because once you get, 30 nanometers, even 20 nanometers or 30 nanometers past 480, because it's like a curve, right? It's not like it's just 480 nanometers that stimulates the receptors. It's a good broad range around, plus or minus 30 or 40 nanometers. The closer you get, the stronger the impact. It's just tapers off, right? So the sunset lenses, our deep orange red lenses address that. But at the same time, they also address the shorter wavelengths because they're blocking all of it. So they're also blocking the reactive oxygen species production range. So it's like daytime blue light in an office or whatever. It's more talking about protecting the retina, but also to some extent protecting the hormonal system from this kind of overstimulation that we discussed earlier. And then the sunset lenses are specifically designed to address the chronobiological system. In other words, the circadian rhythm and sleep and melatonin and cellular repair. So those are kind of like the main differences. And then if you talk like yellow, then orange, then red, like really the difference between the orange and the red is just blocking more into the green range, which we've determined that with the help of Dr. Wunsch, that beyond a certain point, it's not necessary. And it could even be deleterious to make the lens darker and darker and darker, because then the pupil has to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's letting more light in at a certain point. So we found what we believe to be the perfect balance between, blue light protection and blocking certain wavelengths with overall transmission to make the lens functional and useful, so that it's not just like way too dark, which, like the original True Dark glasses were like so dark, people were stumbling over their own feet. Doesn't mean they weren't working, but I think that's an example of like people taking the science to an extent that's not really based on the science anymore.
Yeah, I wore those for a while, and I think some people still ask me, is it a problem if the light's coming in, like the ones you're wearing, like behind versus, the True Dark? I think part of the marketing was that it was like goggles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that goes to what we were talking about with like the receptors being centered in the lower portion of the eye. So the real problem would be light coming from above, which we might even make brand in baseball caps, but you really can't beat a baseball cap when it comes to protection from light overhead. If I go out at night, I have my blue blockers and a baseball cap, and it is the best. I'm really, I think we should make raw branded baseball caps just for fun. So we probably will. And we could market them as like an additional blue light thing, but it's just, you could get any baseball cap. Like, I'm not into deceiving people and lying like, oh, we have a special baseball cap. It's just a baseball cap,
Silver embedded EMF shielding. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not a bad idea. That's actually, that would be cool. That's a great idea. Some EMF blocking, protect your brain. That's a great idea. We should totally do that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Brian Hoyer up here, when I was all about the jackets and the joggers and the underwear and stuff. And he was saying the silver being conductive, touching the skin, that's could be deleterious, and there's unknown effects of harmonics coming off, and you're attracting stuff, and then it's going into your body conductively. But I thought with a baseball cap, if you have hair, I don't think it would conduct through your hair unless you're bald. So probably wouldn't be the same kind of effective.
I don't know if hair.
I think you could sandwich the silver too in between cotton. That's probably what I would do if I invented a EMF shielding baseball cap. Put the silver.
We work on that one together. That could be really cool. If they get Brian involved, but I think that'd be really fun. But I would so do that. That'd be amazing. So yeah, I'm super down. Let's make it gold fold.
No, just the idea is yours. Go for it. Well, awesome. This was this was so fun. And this will actually post Friday. Are you doing a Black Friday sale? Or
we are
Friday. Light
Friday. Exactly. For people to go through your link. So you'll have a link, I guess, in the bio. So I want to make sure people go through your link to the website, and then they'll have access to all of the exclusive offers that come with our Light Friday sale.
Awesome. I'll share it on social media. Matt, it's always so much fun. Yeah, this was overdue. We went on some really interesting tangents that I enjoyed. So that was fun.
Yeah, me too. I'm really glad. Well, we'll have to do another one fairly soon. We have a new type of lens, this actually bluish lens that I've been wearing coming out soon, which is a very interesting product, and it's maybe the coolest breakthrough in circadian lens technology in a long time. But I'll have to explain that on a separate conversation. But the hint is a lens which can, at the same time, protect from certain ranges of blue light while helping stimulate the system from the wavelengths that you want in the morning. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, so really cool stuff. The product of working with the top photobiologists in the world. So we'll make sure to get you one of these and maybe do another conversation when they're ready to go.
I'd love that. Awesome, Matt. We'll stick around as we close out the show. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
I'm excited to see all of the products that Matt is planning to come out with, especially the blue blocking glasses. Those sound really interesting. And as I said at the intro, I was surprised to hear his answer about Elon Musk and X. I personally, call me a black pillar or negative or not optimistic, but I'm with David Icke. He's been doing the rounds the last couple of years on podcasts talking about what he believes Elon Musk's true intentions are. And there's always a underlying reason why people in the limelight do things. In the past, it's never been for good reasons. There's been an underhanded agenda. And I believe the same thing happened with the buying of Twitter to the rebranding of X. I don't think it was a good thing. I think it, like Icke says, is a data mining machine that is feeding Musk's AI system, which he's going full bore with developing, staying up all night long. He said that multiple times. As I told Matt Maruca, hopefully he's right and I'm wrong, and the optimistic perspective wins. But looking back at history, it's been a just stranglehold control system. I was actually inspired after this interview to reorder the book because my movers packed it several months ago because my move has been delayed to more acreage. The book called The Gods of Eden by William Bramley. It takes it all the way back to Enki and Enlil and the extraterrestrial influence. You may or may not be into that, but to me, it made a lot of sense. It connected a lot of dots, and it's shown the control system that's been in play, especially for the last 2,000 years. It is Thanksgiving as I record this, and there's all of the funny memes getting political at dinner. And I'm not going to take this too far right now, but I will just say that I am boycotting Tesla after watching Elon's connections, who he's rubbing shoulders with. I don't trust RFK Jr. I don't trust words and promises. That's the problem. Every 4 years, we trust words and promises. And then as soon as they get in, every freaking time, that gets reversed, and it's actually the opposite of what they said they would do. So I like the pushback to cancel culture, woke culture, all of that stuff. Huge fan of that being demolished, but I don't think we should lose sight of what really matters. Israel first, not America, which is the real problem here and why our country is atrophying and decaying away, because we're supporting a foreign country that is just parasiting off of our tax dollars. People make fun of electric vehicle companies like Rivian or whatever getting a $6 billion taxpayer grant. Meanwhile, since October 7th, 2023, the US has spent a record of nearly $18 billion on military aid to Israel since the quote unquote war. It's really a genocide happening in Gaza since then. So it's just a nightmare, and people can't clearly see the nightmare, I think, because of vitamin and mineral deficiencies. I think that's really apparent that the world's brain is not functional, and we need nutritional supplements to fix that. Food's not enough, and it goes well beyond just the soils being deficient. It's actually the toxicity making us deficient more so than the nutrients not being in the soil, because metals antagonize beneficial minerals and increase oxidative stress, which then burns through your vitamins like vitamins A, D, E, vitamin K2, and your B vitamins. So everything gets depleted when you're exposed to water pollution, air pollution, stuff in the food. Even whole foods is still contaminated. There's not zero heavy metals in your organic produce or even pesticides or herbicides. That is a huge misconception. So I guess I did end up getting political, which is fitting for Thanksgiving. But it's important for people to wake up and understand that there is a system and it can't be fixed with using the system's rules. It has to be fixed with voting for your dollars. That's what I personally do. I'm 100% boycotting Tesla while supporting companies, people that I think are on the right track and doing good things, and just focusing on growing food and making my own energy at home. That is way more important than every 4 years going and putting a mark on a piece of paper thinking that you're going to make a real change. So if you want to check out Matt's website, it's rawoptics.com. And if you click the link either under this podcast or on my website, matt-blackburn.com, it helps support me and all the work that I'm doing. And you can see all of my other products on that website. Again, it's matt-blackburn.com. There's a shop tab. I have my CLF protocol, which is my basic philosophy around human health. And right now it's Black Friday. Usually it goes for a week nowadays. And so you can see a lot of the products on my website are having sales. On the website, I have the Fritz Day blue blocking glasses. Those are the ones that I've been wearing for years. I like those yellow lens glasses. My friends over at Blue Shield and Shen Blossom are having sales. So the discount code Blackburn works for both of those websites. I never leave the house without my Blue Shield mobile unit. And I have the Evo Cube, which is their strongest home unit, plugged into my house. And it really makes a difference. I've told the story before. I got sick when I plugged it in at my first cabin up in Big Bear, California. Felt like I was getting sick for a few days, and then it passed. And I was not expecting that strong of an effect. I thought it was placebo. I really didn't think that the Blue Shield devices would really do anything. And I was shocked. And then Shen Blossom, their culinary products are really underrated. I've been eating really simple, just very boring bachelor meals this year, just using very minimal ingredients on my fish, the Mediterranean spice blend from Shen Blossom. I do the Seatopia fish with that. And then with ground beef or steak, I use the Kukoshi spice blend rub or marinade, which goes really well with red meat. But lately I find it's just been a little bland with my meals, so I've been spicing it up with some of his toasted sesame oil and his traditionally fermented soy sauce called shoyu and tamari. I've been really busy just preparing to move, so my meals have been super quick. I've just needed easy prep, easy cleanup. And lately I've been enjoying just pouring it on as kind of like a dressing, whether on my fish, rice. Those are just really easy to add some phenomenal flavor. And of course, the Presence reishi syrup, I've been using that on ice cream for years. That's phenomenal. People are always looking for parasite products. Their Mountain Detox and their tree resin called Aka Hinoki Blood Purifier. That combo is incredible for parasite detox. I would just put parasite detox after heavy metal cleansing. So there's an order that you should follow, and you shouldn't just jump right into parasite cleansing, which I think a lot of people do. So check out Shen Blossom. All of his products are just incredible. And then something you may have never heard of, the Somni Resonance. I have that on my Matt Blackburn site. So if you go to the S section, it's by Delta Sleeper. It's called the Somni Resonance SR1. That is a fascinating little device. It's a couple $100 on sale for Black Friday with my discount Blackburn, and you put it around your clavicle. And I find this is especially useful when traveling. And it actually generates a electromagnetic frequency that helps you fall asleep and stay asleep and get a restful sleep. I was not expecting to get much of an effect from it because it's such a small device. But if you place it right with the little double-sided sticky tape, it works incredibly well. And you could stack that with the Mitolife grounding sheet. Speaking of Mitolife, that's my brand. You can find that at mitolife.co. Be sure to keep an eye out on your email. You can sign up at the bottom of the website for our Black Friday sale. We did a pre-sale on just the wellness products, which are just basically the supplements, but we're going to open that up to the water filtration units, the grounding sheets, the hair care products, basically all the products coming up this weekend. So that should be live as of this show dropping. Appreciate your support. I have an awesome small team, and we put a lot of time and energy into sharing as much useful, practical, free information as possible on how to use these vitamins and minerals and nutrients, even if you don't purchase from Mitolife. I think we're one of the brands that pumps out the most useful information of almost any supplement company. So that is all for today. Follow me on Instagram, Matt Blackburn. Mitolife is on Instagram as well. And I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.